What's going on, everybody? I'm Morgan J. Ingram. Welcome to a brand new series here at Cognism, Rate My Cold Call. So every week we're going to be reviewing cold calls that have come from live reps, real reps in the field, not made up. This is real talk. And we're going to bring someone that I like to gem it up with, has great expertise to go through this cold call with. And so today we have Marcus Chan. Look, he can do his intro way better than I can. So Marcus, tell us a little bit about yourself and we're going to get into it.
What's up, Morgan? I'm pumped to be here. I'm a guy who's made thousands of cold calls, made thousands of mistakes, have lost a lot of deals, and won a lot of deals. So I'm pumped to be here. We're going to have some fun with this cold call.
We absolutely will, and it's great to have you, man. So let's dive in. So what we're going to do here, y'all, is I have a cold call here. We're going to play it live, and we're going to break it down from the introduction to the value prop, the pitch. We're going to go through some objections, and we're going to go through how he closed this call. And then on top of that, Marcus is going to rate this cold call, all right? So this is purely on to get better. We're not here to roast, we're just here to get people to get better. And so we're just going to dive in this call and we're going to go into it right here. All right, so here we go.
Hi, here calling from. How are you?
I'm all right.
Okay, good. I was just following up an email I sent to you recently around penetration testing and ISO implementation. Did you see that at all?
No, I get thousands of emails a day, so I definitely didn't get that.
Okay, so let's talk about the intro right there. What's your take on it so far?
Yeah, I would say it's I'm going to provide unfiltered feedback because this will hopefully help whoever's out there listening and pay attention to this. It was okay, and I would say it's probably pretty average, especially with how the start goes. So, for example, in my opinion, when you start off with like, I couldn't quite hear him. I think he probably said something like, "How are you doing?" or "How's your day going?" Which
yep, that's what it was. How's your day
invariably going? They're always like, "It's fine." Like, why are you calling me? Basically, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of saw that a little bit. Just he's like, why are you calling? And in my opinion, when you start with a question like that, you are setting yourself up for, generally speaking, usually not a great response, which then kind of leads into the next point where he's like, hey, I sent you over these emails. Did you see that? If it's any normal exec, they get hundreds of emails every single day.
Yeah.
They don't see most of it, right? So when you start to that point, as an exec, you're just getting more frustrated. So you're kind of like, no, I didn't see it. Get to the point. So that's where, from the get-go, if you're leading with these questions and frameworks, you're setting yourself up for generally a more negative response to begin with.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. I do want to double down on the email piece because when I do trainings, and you probably do this too, when you're coaching the people that are going through your program, is like, what outcome are you expecting when you ask that question?
Correct.
And they're like, oh, well, they're just going to say, hey, I saw the email. And I was like, okay, so how many times out of the thousands of cold calls you've done and you've asked this, has someone been like, oh, you know what? That email you sent was
What a banger.
Like,
Still
it was
remember
a banger.
It's never happened to me. It's never happened to me.
It's never happened to me. And we've probably collectively made hundreds of thousands of cold calls. I've never had anyone say that. So I just tell people, okay, if what you're asking question-wise is not the outcome of what you're looking for, why do we ask this question? And it just puts them on their heels in defense. Let's get rid of it. So I just wanted to like amplify that point even more because I think it's one of the most pointless questions you can ask on a cold call.
100%. And think about what could you replace it with, right? Is it going to be a problem statement, right? Hey, with certain title of these type of roles that run these two problems, which one's most relevant for you? Okay. Like that's going to be more relevant versus did you get my email? Right. I think another point to mention as well, and this used to happen to me a lot, when we ask questions that don't serve us on the call, don't serve them as well, it hurts our confidence. And we start to sound not confident. And that's a really scary thing to do. So even if you had the perfect opener, perfect whatever, do your best to maintain composure and confidence and carry the ball through. Because as they hear you falter a little bit in your tonality, your attitude, it's like blood in the water for a shark. You just want to be really careful with that.
Yeah. You do. I think that's a great call out. So let's listen into like how this pitch goes as he's going into it.
Appreciate that. And to be honest, that was the reason I was reaching out for a call. I could imagine someone like you would always be getting hundreds, if not thousands, of emails a day. The reason I specifically reached out to you is we've been working with a number of similar companies, these tech-focused companies that have got a lot of legislative and compliance demands, particularly supporting in those two areas I mentioned, their penetration testing needs and their ISO implementation. And we've seen a dramatic actually increase, particularly in the penetration testing requirements of those businesses over the course of this year. That's really been led by by that increased supply risk management, is, that vendor due diligence that all of us are really starting to experience now. And that's the reason I reached out to you. There's a couple of companies we could go through I've worked with in a very similar way. I just wanted to understand really how you guys look after your pen testing needs there.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like a lot of different pieces there. As of right now, we have an internal team that's looking into that. We've looked at some other solutions.
That's heading right into the objection. So we're going to cover that in a minute. But I just want to see that response up to this point. So that was the value prop. What's your take on that? What could be improved? Was that spot on? What are you hearing?
So I would say it wasn't bad, but it wasn't amazing either. I always think about whenever you go into your value prop, because he goes into a value prop and he wants to ask like an open-ended question, like, what do you think about this? Or what are you doing for this? The longer you go on about the value prop, the more they're already like, why is this, like, what's this all about? So how can we take that, condense it down as short as possible? Get right to the point as fast as possible. This process doesn't care about how many emails these guys probably received. So, hey, it's cool. Anyway, the reason I was calling, and get right into the point at this point. Because now this guy's probably annoyed. So get to the point, hey, the reason I'm calling is because we're already working with, XYZ companies in your industry to deal with problems 1, 2, and 3. How do you guys currently deal with these problems? So that's just, all we're just going to do is condense it down as much as possible. And there's a couple benefits to why you want to condense it down. Number one, it's easier for you to say and go through. Number two, people want to know why you're calling, so you get to a point faster. And number three, because you're saying less words, you're going to be more confident, hopefully, going through it. But the longer it is, the more stuff you add in,
right,
the more likely you are to botch it, mess up, where he messed up a couple of times, and you can hear him, he's maintained it relatively well, but he's still faltered a little bit. So shorter, more condensed, and then go for that open-ended question at the end.
So when you say shorter, condensed, what's your recommendation? 20, 30 seconds? Once you get over 30, it's like you should get out of there. Like, what's the range there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. That 20, 30 seconds, I think, is a good sweet spot. It gets you right there, especially if you kind of open it up with a couple of questions like that. All right, get to the point as fast as you can. Like, why are you calling this guy? They're already thinking that. And they're nice enough not to just to hang up, so don't abuse that. Get right to the point as fast as possible. Make it as succinct as possible. One thing I recommend, especially when you're in cold calling, some people agree and disagree, it doesn't really matter, but you should have a framework already written on what you're going to say. So that way you can say it very succinctly, very quickly, and right to the point. And it cuts through all the BS jargon that you might say instead. So for example, he was saying a lot of things in there. My brain, not being from the industry, is glossing over it. Right. So this prospect, you're interrupting for whatever they're doing, like fires in their house around now they're trying to deal with. When you call and you start using a bunch of jargon very quickly, they can actually hurt you. So how can you simplify down as much as possible? And so you write it out beforehand, what you're going to say, and you just hit those points. Hey, in talking with other title in this industry, they have these 2 issues, these 3 issues. How do you deal with them? Very direct, very succinct. Much easier to say as well.
I like that a lot. And I think the condensed, easier state or composed, because there was moments where he almost was repeating himself on what he was saying. Correct. Right? Because he was like, okay, I think I need to add more. I think I need more. It's like, yo, you get out.
Like, that's right. That's out. Right. Like, just get out. Just simplify it down. You're talking through the sale, but you're talking to the value prop here. So how can we say more with less words?
So let's go into the next part, which is, sounds like there was objection. Let's see how he answers it.
Really feel like it was a fit for us, and what we're doing right now, we're pretty solid with. So if you want to send me an email with more information, like that might be more applicable.
So yeah, I appreciate, I've called you out the blue here, Morgan. But just really, I'd like to sort of arrange a call that we could have a more deeper discussion around this.
Yeah. I mean, sounds like a couple things, could be aligned. I would say like the best thing right now, we're heads down on a couple projects. If you could maybe reach out to me in a month, I think I'd be able to schedule that call.
Okay, I've got no problem doing that. I've got you on the call now. We pencil something in for that month's time when you're probably not going to be as busy as you are now. I'll make sure I follow up in the run-up to that. If there's any problems, obviously, we can move it. But if not, it means we've both got that time aside and we can really get a deep conversation, and I can see if we are the sort of consultancy that would be able to adequately support you.
Yeah, no, that works for me.
All right, cool. So a couple things here, right? So the first part is how he handled the email objection. That happens a lot, right? So you probably hear that a lot. I've heard it a lot. So how did he handle that? Could he have done something different? And then I'll tell you about the next one, which is like how he closed. How was that? But let's go over the email objection and how he went over that part.
Yeah. So the email objection was interesting. Listening to him to overcome it. His was basically kind of ignore it and go for the booking, which, hey, you know what? That could actually work sometimes. All right. Because you and I both know, like most of the time, sending me the email means I'll never look at it. Because I never looked at your last emails you sent me anyways, right? So why would I look at this one, right? So that's a simple strategy that works really well. I would say anytime you're going to go for overcoming an objection, even with something like that, which is basically the ignore objection maneuver, the sooner you can get for a close, I think is going to be better. So let's just say if he's going to ignore it, he say, hey, cool, that's exactly why I called. So actually, let's set up a time to discuss in more detail. How's Thursday at 8 o'clock? Going for like control not to close, I think is gonna be more effective versus kind of like throwing it out there. Like we should schedule a call, and the guy just jumps in, right? So that's totally fine. Another potential approach is, of course, I can obviously send you as much as I want, but I'll make sure it's really specific to you. So what specifically would you like to see inside the email? So I don't send you 1,000 pages of stuff that's gonna waste your time. And they're like, oh well, you know, and they have whatever like excuse, and you can say, okay, actually, that's why we should discuss in more detail. How's Thursday at 8? So you can go for another close from there. But his approach wasn't necessarily bad. I think if he just kind of tied a bow around it, he might have been able to hopefully secure a meeting because of that.
Yeah, the bulldog approach of just ignoring it only works with like certain people. You gotta have a certain like style, confidence, moxie in order to get over it. It's not something I would even coach people to do, because like if you mess that up, you're probably not gonna be in sales too long, because you're gonna get beat up real quick. So I'm like, you should acknowledge. I agree with you. To confirm, the control. Hey, I'll send you an email on this, but we should book time as well. I think that's always the best way to do it. A rule of reciprocity, all those different things, right? I think those all play into those factors. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it comes down to just having the confidence and the pace with it. And I always encourage reps as well. If someone pushes back on you and they still don't want to meet, you can also use the humble disclaimer and call them out and say, hey, look, I don't really want to say this. I know this might be odd, but typically when people say to send me an email, it just gets lost in the business email. And like, I don't want to clutter your inbox. So like, we can put time on the calendar to meet, or if this isn't interesting, like completely fine as well. I think that's another thing you can put out there. Again, that is a different way of going about it. But I encourage reps to do that, to call out the prospect respectfully and tell them, hey, like, I don't want to clutter your inbox because you might not even look at this. They handled the objection. They went into like the close of the call. What would you have done differently on that close of the call there?
So, it's interesting because it's almost like he accepted defeat, if you will.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, all right, then I will look forward to calling you in 1 month, in which you probably won't answer. And I think, right. So at this point, if you notice the energy of the guy, he actually shifts a little bit. So he kind of started off with kind of like, hey, like, like I get hundreds of emails, whatever. So now he's kind of like, actually pretty relatively open friendly. He's like, hey, actually we have a couple different projects. So, probably in a month or so. So I think at this point, him going for that close of like, oh, all right, see you later, isn't okay, right? I think you're better off just having a little deeper conversation. Hey, cool, that makes a lot of sense, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect. Hey, can you help me understand what are the two projects you're talking about? Because potentially we don't know what they're going to say, but it may give you some insight what's going on in their world, and potentially might give you another angle to align your value prop to those products too. Potentially. We don't really know. The second piece is you also might find out it's made up. like it's not even real. Like, oh, we got some projects. Like, just so I have a good understanding, from a perspective, like what are those products specifically? Oh, well, it's gonna be I gotta hire some people. I don't know. Right. So at that point, it's like you can determine if you want to try to go for another close for an earlier time or not. Right. It's kind of depending on how the response goes, or maybe if it was, again, it's not real, and you can politely, professionally call them out again to see if it's even a priority to have a conversation. Right. So that allows you a little more room to work with that call. Now, let's just say, for example, let's say it's a real project. Like, hey, we're actually in a system migration. We're actually like 2 weeks away from being done, and we have 2 weeks of testing. That's exactly why. Like, we can't do anything new until then. And it seemed like a very legitimate, based on how they explain. They have a lot of good detail, whatever. So at that point, we didn't hear the rest of it, right? Let's just say if you are going to, have a call for a month out, like, how can you make it more firm? How can you make it more secure, right? So you get specific on date and time. That makes a lot of sense. After those two products, let's just make sure we actually have something penciled on the calendar. I know it's a month out, but let's take a look right now, and I'll definitely reach out beforehand, a couple of days to make sure we're still good. So does this date, I don't know, November 12th at this time work for you on your calendar? Okay, cool. Let me send you an invite. Can you accept the invite? Did you get that? Okay, cool. Can you accept it? Great. And you can lock the meeting up to be a little more firm. And then, of course, just make sure you follow up beforehand a few days in advance to make sure they're actually going to show up too.
Right. No, that flow is great. I think also just even getting a placeholder with the email, right? That could have been an addition as well, right? It was just kind of saying, hey, a month later, and it's like, okay. Like you said, it's just like, okay, that person's gone in the wind at this point.
Oh, yeah. They're not going to remember, So you have to like control what you can't control, on the call.
Love it. Okay, so that was the entire call. That was the breakdown. So as we're wrapping up here, okay, out of 10, Marcus, what are you rating this call and why?
All right, so let me explain my rating system so everyone knows. All right, 1 is the absolute worst. 10 is the absolute rock star. That's like A+ status. 5 is like very average, very, very average. I'll give this like a 6.5 to 7. Right?
Okay.
And let me explain why. Because I still think it's probably better than some average ones. Because he didn't just fold up the first objection. Some people just fold up the first objection.
That's true.
That's true. That. Sometimes they're like, oh, send me an email. Okay, I'll send you an email. They fold, right? He maintained cadence pretty well. It wasn't perfect, but he kind of kept the flow going relatively well, right? We all heard calls where they're kind of choppy and awkward. He did relatively decent, kind of flowing through it. He sounded like he knew what he was talking about. It wasn't perfect by any means, but he tried. And I think if you just did that, you'll book some meetings. But I think if you make a couple of tweaks, you can easily make it an 8, a 9, a 10 with just a few small tweaks.
Love that. No, I think that's the piece. I think it's just like knowing how to navigate the 3 things, right? Knowing how to navigate the objections in his favor. 2 is narrow down value prop. 3, better intro. You're on your way.
That's it. Tiny tweaks will make a huge difference.
Love that. Well, Marcus, thanks so much for hopping on our cold calling show here, breaking down a cold call. We figured it out. We got it sorted. So I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on, man. It was my pleasure.
Cheers.